Ellen Nanuses. Ellen, a very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a while since we've had you on any NBC platforms, I must say. Are you excited to be back?
Very much.
Briefly talk to us about the role of SABA. What are some of the aims and objectives of SABA?
You know, the Southern Africa Broadcasting Association has existed for media development in Southern Africa. And basically, our aims have been mostly to strengthen digitalization across the Southern African part of this continent. And then we have looked at issues such as programming and content development for broadcasters, especially public broadcasters. And then it's important for us that we continue to do training and build capacity amongst the stations that we represent. Another very important aspect for SABA is that SABA looks to the empowerment of women in the broadcasting industry, but also using broadcasting to empower women in every other sector. As you would remember, we ran one of the most successful summits last year, looking at the empowerment of women and using the media as a tool to speak to the issues that happen to women all across the sectors, be it politics, be it government, also just on a domestic level of what happens with women in the social spheres that we deal with.
And how have you fared in these regards?
It has been very excellent. If you look at our profile, SABA is very much involved on country level with every country that we represent. It is important also that we note that currently, as we speak, a very important aspect in terms of public broadcasting is the content that we produce, and that the content that we produce has to speak to the current issues that is related to the nations that we live in. And we've ran trainings in terms of shoring up our producers in terms of the important aspects such as our economies, such as the political frameworks that we work within, the legal frameworks that also govern media. Mm-hmm. And if you look at efforts such as that, it's important that we reflect and note that media doesn't just operate in a vacuum, but that we need to speak to specific issues. And as SABA, it has been important for us to always pinpoint what are those issues and to address them.
It has been a 25-year journey, a very long one, I must say. Are you overall pleased with where we are right now? Do you feel that we lack in certain areas that you can improve upon?
Yes. You see, in terms of public broadcasting, the major challenge that has always been there for public broadcasters has been funding. Mm-hmm. And if you look at such a challenge, it means that there are certain things that you can do with organizations and certain things that you cannot do. Mm-hmm. But in the life of SABA, the commitment of member countries have always been of a very high culture. And if you look at that, it shows that over the years, SABA would always congregate, they would always bring together program directors, they would always bring together commercial directors, they would always bring together people that could speak to the technical viability and the technological growth and advancements in the industry. And that shows you that the organization itself has made it a point to be on the forefront of the developments that are taking place in the broadcasting sector and to make sure that their stations are at the forefront of the new developments that are taking place. Mm-hmm. I mean, innovation and research is a very key area if you're going to be in broadcasting. And you will note that our member organizations, they're very much part of the platforms and conferences that are happening, whether it be only on content, whether it only be on regulation, or whether it be even technological advancements. It's very important for us because you can't be in a sector that is moving so quickly and then you're falling behind.
Exactly.
Yes. So over the years, if you look at the life of this organization, it has gone through many leadership changes, obviously because it is run by a board of directors that are director generals of the public broadcasters in SADC. And every time you also go through changes with secretary generals, and every time you have your committees also changing, your technical committees, your content committees, your regulatory committees. But overall, all of them have done very well over the years.
Digitalization in SADC.
Perfect. That's a very good one. I see, you know, when you look at digitalization in SADC, that has been one of the most challenging projects because if you look at a project such as migrating from analog to digital broadcasting, it's a project of billions. And as you will see when we go to the SABA Broadcasting Forum, that's a key issue to do tracking in terms of how far we have come. Currently, you will note that we've only had about 6 to 7 countries. The 7th country is currently still in migration. And that is an indication of how costly this project is.
Which country is that?
It's Zimbabwe. So it's an indication of how costly this project is. Nonetheless, it's a project that even governments are committed to, because when you have gone to a meeting with the International Telecommunications Union and you have all agreed that you need to migrate from analog to digital broadcasting, it's important that you implement that. It is not only about better sound and better picture quality. You must remember that this whole migration has to do with releasing spectrum and utilizing frequency much more effectively. And the reason for that is currently we are moving into a digital space, you can call it that, because we want to release spectrum that can be used for mobile. And mobile broadband, that means that we will be able to bring internet, we will be able to bring better ICT services, even to rural sectors and the most marginalized sectors. That is why this migration has been so important that it happens. Yet it is costly, but we believe still that as countries are mobilizing resources and they continue to implement, that we will be able to use the spectrum that gets released for mobile broadband, which is so essential if you're going to connect your communities, because the connectivity of communities is very important. You will realize, even if you listen to the World Economic Forum, they will always speak about connecting communities and making internet available. I mean, if you are living in a society where information has become the highway, you need to ensure that your people in your locality, be it on country basis or regional basis, that they have access to the internet, that they have access to tools of ICT, but also that they are able to access these services on an affordable rate. You cannot have services that people cannot really access and that they cannot afford. And therefore, these projects are very important that they get looked at, not only on a global level, but that they get looked at on a regional level and especially on local level. And this is where the commitments of governments have been very key. And I mean, if you just look at the NBC, which is a success story in terms of DDT, I mean, NBC switched off on 17 July 2015, which was the deadline given. And it was essential that a small country, people always refer to Namibia as a small country with a small population, one of the youngest nations that have come to independence, but they make these big strides. And when they go to international fora, it is always such a refreshing story to be told, because the first thing they ask is, where's Namibia? But then, Namibia continues to punch way above its weight. And then it's always inspirational. And it tells other countries, well, if they could have done it, then we can certainly do it as well.
Ellen, looking at all of these issues that you just raised, they are probably going to be mentioned at the 5th Africa and Digitalisation Conference. Speak to us about this conference.
Perfect. You know, the 5th Africa and Digitalisation Conference, as we say, it is the 5th edition that we are in this conference. It's a very important platform for public broadcasters. But also you must remember that SABA is not only representing public broadcasters. We also have commercial broadcasters, like MultiChoice is a member of SABA. We have companies like NENSys. They are satellite service providers, members such as SES. So when we talk about the 5th edition of this conference, this year it's very important for us. But before I get there, let's talk about the SABA Forum. The SABA Broadcasting Forum, number one, will do a review on what has happened with DDT across countries. But there's a very important aspect that I believe even us as broadcasters always neglect, and it's the role that radio has played over the years. And at this forum, we are saying that we need to highlight the role of radio as well, because we always run away with television. And you know, you will hear, it's not only at the NBC or in Namibia that you will hear that TV are the stars and radio is like a stepchild. It's across all the countries. And we are saying at this platform, we need to address the role of radio, including traditional radio, currently still in our nations. Because if you look at the penetration rates of ICTs across our countries, not everybody still has access to a smartphone, meaning they still get their information on a radio platform. They still have to use their normal radios on FM and listen to the important information that helps them to make their decisions about their lives. So we cannot at this point in time abandon that. But there's a follow-up discussion to that, looking at if television has already migrated to digital broadcasting, what about radio? Is radio also going to follow suit? And what will be the implications if radio is going to follow suit? And what will be the technical requirements? What will regulation look like? What will licensing look like in that space? And what will happen to the formats that we use in terms of producing that type of content? Another very important aspect is our universities, the training that we provide in the universities versus the needs in the skills and in the job market. Are they really well matched? So we have a very key conversation looking at the curriculums of universities and speaking to the current needs, and especially we look to the current needs of the industry in the space of what ICTs and the internet has done to the broadcasting platforms that we have. That it has had such a huge impact on how media has developed. Now you have online. Now you have content on mobiles. Now you can be anywhere and you can have content anywhere. So it's important to see whether the training that we are offering, is it really enabling people to come into the sector and be able to do a quality of work, or do you still have to reskill your people when you receive them? So it's important that we look at that. And then we are looking
Ellen, sorry, running out of time. Just quickly, I wish we could discuss this further. Just quickly, where is the conference going to be taking place? What time and who is invited?
Before we get that, the 5th Africa and Digitalisation Conference takes place at the Gateway Conference Centre, and it starts on Monday. Very important aspect to remember about this is that we are looking at convergence between media, ICTs, and telecommunications. If you look, for us as SABA, it's very important that we always look at what are the new developments that are going to take place in the industry, and that we skill up our members, that we always give them a target, what to prepare for. Because if you're going to sit in your strat meeting, you need to plan for a goal. And our platforms are of such a nature that we are always forward-looking and saying, this is what you need to prepare for. Because we know that in terms of the telecommunications industries, that voice is not going to be the biggest income earner for them anymore. It's services like OTT. And if you look at the business plans of telecommunications companies currently, you notice that they're implementing services like website advertising, they're implementing stuff like broadcasting. So you see that there's convergence between these two sectors. And one of the key things, part of this, that we also discuss is what's happening with the media development landscape and the laws that govern expression of freedom of expression, plurality of media ownership, and the development of women in that space. Because you can't have gender and then you don't have gender mainstreaming with every development that takes place in a sector. Indeed. And for us at SABA, because it's one of our objectives, we always need to look at, when we are developing a sector, how much are we developing the women that are also in that sector? And then one of the things that always very exciting for us to do at SABA is to look at innovation. Fantastic. What can we always look forward to in terms of change, and what can we always look forward to in terms of development in our sectors? And if you come, you will be able to see all of that.
Very exciting conference to look forward to.
Always,
indeed. Ellen, thank you so much for making the time out to join us this morning.
Thank you for having us. And for NBC, it's very key for us to have NBC as a partner. I mean, it's the host of SABA. It's been the host of SABA for many years. And the countries trust NBC to be able to host this very important platform.
Thank you so much. That was Ellen Nanusses, Secretary General of the Southern Africa Broadcasting Association, speaking about the 25-year journey of the association, as well as the upcoming 5th Africa and Digitalisation Conference.